Hello, my friends. Welcome to TEDxMileHigh. I am Dr. Dwinita Mosby Tyler, and I am the chief catalyst and founder of the Equity Project and today's Emcee. So 2 years ago, I was standing right here on this very stage, not as your host, but as a TEDx speaker. I had spent weeks rehearsing and practicing and rehearsing and practicing and rinse and repeat my own talk. I had no idea what would happen. I was a little nervous. Well, let me take that back. I was a lot nervous. And I know that I'm a reflection of what's happening backstage right now with the speakers that you'll be hearing from. And today, I'm happy to announce that my TEDxMileHigh talk has reached over 2 million people around the globe. I couldn't be more proud. But I have to tell you, when I delivered that talk, I had no idea what was just around the corner. Actually, none of us did. So much has changed in those 2 years. The world has changed. I know I've changed. And I'd bet you anything that you have changed too. Don't you agree? Yeah. That's why I'm so honored to be here with you today to host our first in-person event in 2 years. So I want you to sit back and relax because today you'll be hearing from our community of activists and entrepreneurs, innovators, researchers, and artists. So I'd like to ask you to silence your cell phones and savor this beautiful experience. And enjoy the people around you too. Together we're part of a movement, a community of like-minded individuals. This is our opportunity to rethink old ways of being and old ways of doing. So let's unleash our collective imagination and envision an entirely new future. Are you ready? All right. So take a deep breath, unclench your jaw, maybe for the first time in 2 years or months, and give me a little shoulder shimmy. I want you to get into it, little shoulder shimmy. And I wore the outfit to go with the shoulder shimmy. And so we'll start with a quick poll, the old-fashioned kind of poll, so just for fun. Where are my crunchy peanut butter people at in the room? Let me hear some noise. Oh my gosh. What about the creamy peanut butter people? Okay. Classical music listeners. All right. Heavy metal fans. Hip hop and R&B. Okay. Raise your hand if you almost never wear sunglasses. All 3 of you, yeah. Raise your hand if you won't be caught dead without sunglasses. All right. Okay, this is all very interesting. We've learned so much about each other already, especially about peanut butter. So these questions might seem random, but after our first speaker, they'll make a lot more sense. She's an occupational therapist, has a PhD in infant and early childhood development, and is an affiliate faculty member at the Colorado State Department of Occupational Therapy. Please join me in welcoming Virginia Spielmann.
Thank you. Let me present you with 3 medical mysteries. And as I present each situation, see if you can figure out what's really going on and what they all have in common. First is Gabby. She comes to me with her 3-year-old daughter, Eva, and she tells me Eva doesn't like her, never has, not since birth. She tells me Eva is a daddy's girl, but to the extreme, it's like she's only comfortable with dad. Second, Alex, 13 years old and shockingly thin. He's been in inpatient eating disorder clinics twice, and nothing's working. He has a very small menu of foods that he eats: pickles, green olives, and rice. He gets dizzy and fatigued and relies on supplements for nutrition. His parents are terrified, and he gets bullied at school, but he just won't eat. Third is Jasmine, 35 years old, and her marriage is in shambles. Jasmine and her husband have been to counseling a few times, and their problems always boil down to sex. But this isn't your classic sexual dysfunction. It's not low libido. In fact, Jasmine really fancies her husband. She wants to be with him that way. But sex leaves her feeling outside her skin, and him feeling rejected. Okay, so 3 cases: a young child who vastly prefers dad to mum, an adolescent who presents as having an eating disorder, and an adult who doesn't enjoy sex despite wanting to. What do you think they all have in common? Physical abuse, sexual abuse? Good guesses, but no. It could be depression, anxiety, PTSD, but not in this case. These individuals all have differences in sensory integration, disordered, if you like, sensory processing. Now, you may have heard of sensory processing in relation to children or autism, and if so, that is great. But it doesn't end there, you see, because we're all sensory creatures. You learned about the 5 senses at school, I hope: vision, taste, touch, smell, and sound. But there's also our sense of equilibrium. It's here in our inner ear. And our sense of position. That's how you know if your ankle is flexed or extended without looking at your foot. We also sense our heart rate, our bladder status, whether our stomach's churning, parts of interoception. Sensory integration is such a part of everyday life that we take it for granted. It's almost mundane. But it's also a complex neurophysiological process that we don't pay nearly enough attention to. I got into this work through an unusual route. As a camp counselor, I was always the one put with the difficult kids, the problem children that no one else wanted to hang out with. But I really enjoyed them. They were my homies. And then, after high school, I went and lived and worked for a year in an orphanage in the special needs unit. And those children had very unique ways of experiencing the world. And so I learned to adjust my approach. A softer voice for this child, and a more animated voice and face and play for another. It wasn't until I went to university that I realized what I was learning about, thinking about, responding to, is something called sensory integration and processing. And then I realized that these problem children, they weren't a problem at all. Their difficult behaviors would dramatically diminish as soon as we addressed their sensory needs. As a society, we've embraced the importance of mental health. But it's time that we come to understand and recognize the impact of sensory health too. Let's go back to our 3 cases from before. Gabby and Eva, her daughter. Eva isn't choosing to reject Gabby. Eva's nervous system is in charge of these reactions. Eva's dad has a deep voice and firm, strong touch. Mum uses a higher-pitched, sing-song motherese and a softer touch. Sensory inputs that are distressing for Eva's brain and body. So what's the solution? Well, with Eva and Gabby, it's a sensory-informed parent coach who spends time with them both, waiting and watching and wondering, and tunes in to Eva's signals. They coach Mum, use a deeper register of voice, use firmer touch for holding hands and cuddles. And they even encourage her to play with Eva on swings big enough for both of them. because the movement of the swing helps Eva be in her body and engage with Mum. Gabby and Eva get to know each other for the first time. Gabby and Eva fall in love. Alex, our teenager, who presents as having an eating disorder, isn't choosing to be difficult about food, and he doesn't want to lose any more weight. But he doesn't know what's in his mouth, whether it's a piece of egg or a piece of meat, if he can't see it with his eyes. And so learning to organize the muscles of his mouth and tongue for chewing and swallowing, really hard. Also, a couple of semi-serious choking incidences as a child left him really scared and reluctant to try new foods. Alex finds a feeding therapist who's willing to try something different, and they use the food scientist adaptation of the SOS approach by Dr. Kay Toomey. And they start with his preferred foods. They start with pickles. And so just enjoying a pickle, he gets to try and lock down the qualities of the food he's eating. Is it salty, crunchy, sour, sweet? They play biting and spitting games. They sit in front of mirrors and play motor control games. And they get little cubes of pickle and put them on toothpicks and put them on his back teeth. And then he just masters moving his preferred foods around his mouth. And he does. He starts to master feeding and eating. And it opens the door for him to be able to work on his trauma with a mental health professional. And then there's Jasmine. Jasmine, who finds touch really confusing. She was a clumsy kid at school. She feels like that now with her husband, like she's trying to dance with two left feet. Sometimes she doesn't know which shoulder he's touching her on or where he's kissed her. But she does know she has to grit her teeth and bear it, otherwise he's going to take it personally. Jasmine and her husband find an occupational therapist with advanced training and sensory integration, and together they establish what works for both of them. They drop soft touch from their repertoire, no more neck kissing or nuzzling, and he gives her a deep, firm massage to down-regulate her nervous system. They also find a really great vibrator that helps Jasmine get aroused without adding in extra touch. So, these three cases could easily have been labeled bad daughter, bad mother, bad student, bad wife. But that simply wasn't the case at all. So for parents, for educators, for doctors, for any of us, when we're out in public and we see someone acting in a way that we think is a bit strange, let's stop before we label them and consider if they might be dealing with a sensory issue. Sensory integration and processing are parts of everyday life. So if we want to be a bit more understanding, we need to hold this in mind. You're all familiar with the concept of hangry, when you're so hungry that you're angry, but you don't actually join the dots at the time. But as soon as you eat, you revert back to your regulated, functional self. Well, hangry applies to all things sensory. And so if we can remember that, then we can be a bit more understanding, have a bit more grace, remembering that someone else might not be experiencing things the way that we are. So, for all of us, for you, if you want to flourish, if you want to be happier, healthier, be more productive, more joyful, more loving, then we need to start paying attention to our sensory needs. There's a fun side to this too. Sensory health and sensory-informed living doesn't just end at the therapy center, it extends far beyond that. Take exercise, for example. The fitness industry would have us believe that there's only a few valid types of exercise at any one time, and right now it's strength training, high-intensity interval training, and running. But running isn't a moral issue. If you like running, it's because that's what works for your sensory systems. That's what works for your body. Running doesn't make you a superior human. I'm sorry, it's true. And if you don't like running, then that's okay. You can figure out what works for you. Take my son, for example. He really likes horse riding. And there's nothing that makes him feel as calm and grounded as when he rides a horse. Posture's online, legs are firm, heels in, moving with the warm horse, the rich smells. It connects him to his body like nothing else. And when he misses a session, we all know he's going to have a tougher week at school. But someone else might not like horse riding for the same reasons he likes it. And this isn't about whether horseback riding is good or bad. This is about you figuring out what works for you. This extends to the workplace and to school as well. Many people did really well during work from home, and it wasn't because of the convenience. It was because they had complete control over their sensory environment. Think about it. What works best for you? Is it bright lights or muted lights? Music in the background? Silence? Perhaps one song on repeat? Do you do your best work sitting at a desk, standing, or floor sitting? Do you do your best work in a suit or in sweats? Some people really are most comfortable wrapped in a blanket in a darkened room, and we might judge them as lazy or unprofessional. But if that's what meets their sensory needs, then they will be more productive and happier employees if we can provide that. Your sensory experience of life is like no one else's. So own it. Pause several times a day and do a body scan. Figure out what works for you. Become a detective of your sensory preferences and the master of how you feel, because how you feel changes everything. Thank you.
Virginia, thank you so much. That was so fascinating. And I don't think I'll ever think of sensory or exercise or any of the things that Virginia talked about in quite the same way. Thank you. So, if you're like me, you've probably read a lot about something called the Great Resignation in the news, a lot. In the last 2 years, so many people have lost their jobs or left their jobs or changed their jobs or started new career paths completely. Who here has changed their career path completely since the pandemic started? Just show of hands. All right, well, good for you. That's great. Our next speaker will change the way you think about adult education. He is the first-generation son of immigrants from Trinidad and Tobago. He studied at the French Culinary Institute of New York and is the executive chef for Kamal Heritage Food. Please welcome Arden Lewis.
When I was 25, I came to a startling realization, sobering in fact. I didn't like my job. Actually, more than that, I hated that I didn't have a plan B. But why would I? I mean, I followed the map to success. After high school, I graduated from Brown University with a degree in applied mathematics. Shout out to all my Brunonians out there. And then after that, I got a job in technology at Goldman Sachs. I made it to Wall Street. I was the man, yo. I was riding this wave for about 10 minutes until it hit me. this feeling of unfulfillment. It was as if I was staring out at an abyss of just non-options. Until a friend of mine reminded me of my love for cooking. I think they saw something in me that I hadn't quite seen yet, because they suggested that I become a chef. Okay, chef. I mean, I didn't want to go back to school for 2 or 4 years again. And I didn't know exactly what I was getting into, so I reached out to about a dozen restaurants in New York at that time to see if I could work for them for free after my full-time job. Only one restaurant called me back, and it wasn't a chef. It was Morty. Morty, a general manager from this popular restaurant in the Theater District in New York. So we made arrangements, and the next day I met up with him at 6 p.m. as directed after work. And when I walked into that dining room, it was the most beautiful dining room I had seen. There were these tall, vaulted ceilings. And then on the west side of the restaurant, there was this mezzanine that just ran the entire length. And as Morty led me through that dining hall, every table had like this fine dining white tablecloth on it. Everything pristine, immaculate, everything was in its place. And I walked through that dining hall, and Morty led me to the stairwell. Well, when we started walking down that stairwell, the lighting got dimmer, and the ceilings got lower. I mean, much, much lower. The polished floors and painted walls became exposed brick and unfinished concrete. And just as I was thinking to myself, what am I getting myself into here? We turned the corner to reveal the busiest scene I had ever seen, the back of house, kitchen. I remember thinking, there's so much stuff, so many people. And so when I got to my station, the chef came up to me, and he introduced himself. I introduced myself, Arden. And he said, Ardenon, I don't know where he got that from. He said, Ardenon, do you know how to peel a potato? I said, yes, I know how to peel a potato. This is it. This is my moment. I was confident. I know how to peel a potato. And so he handed me a potato, and when I grabbed it, I started peeling that potato with the greatest precision known to man. There was not an ounce of skin left on that potato. It was my masterpiece. And so I handed that masterpiece to the chef, and he looked at me and he said, that's not how you peel a potato. So he gestured over to another cook, and the cook came over and he asked the cook to peel the potato for me. Done. He was fast. I mean, superhuman fast. And so with my ego recalibrated, I got to the prep table, and for the rest of that night with that cook, I peeled. I peeled and peeled. But there was something entrancing about standing there at that prep table with that cook, peeling and peeling for hours. There was something entrancing about it. I found myself in a potato peeling race with that cook. Admittedly, he didn't know that he was a part of that race. But I guess I should admit to you that I never won any of the races. But the more we did, the faster I was. I was getting better. And so for the next 2 months, I spent the next 3 days every night, 3 nights a week after work, every week, peeling hundreds and hundreds of pounds of potatoes, onions, and carrots. I did that before they even let me touch parsley with a knife. And remember, I did all of that for free. In most industries, you have 2 options, right? You take time off of paid work and pay for an education, or you take time off of paid work and you get an internship. In hindsight, when I look at my potato peeling stint, it was a sign of my privilege. I mean, I was in my mid-20s, I was single in New York, I was making good money, I didn't have any children or family to support. I could afford to work for free in that kitchen. But that's not everybody. In fact, most people live paycheck to paycheck. Most people do have children and family to support, and far too many people work multiple jobs just to make ends meet, if at all. If we want to live in a more equitable society, we need to rethink adult education. Instead of asking students to contort their lives around school, perhaps we as educators should meet them where they are. It just requires a little bit of flexibility, right? Maybe a little bit more than a little, but flexibility. It's a skill we all look for in ourselves, our employers, our employees. So after my potato peeling stint, I actually did go to culinary school, but part-time and definitely not for 2 years or 4 years, never again. And after I graduated, I decided to explore every aspect of the culinary world possible, from high-end dining restaurants to full-service catering to trendy cocktail lounges. I even did a stint in TV production. And then one day, my girlfriend's career brought us to Denver, where I came across an unusual job post. A job post for Kamal Heritage Food Incubator, a paid training program that teaches immigrant and refugee women to start their own food businesses. What? I was confused. What were you, Kamal? Were you a culinary school? Were you a restaurant? Were you a nonprofit? Well, I'll tell you. The answer is all of the above, right? Kamal is all of those things. In 2016, a group of 6 immigrant women in the Inaiah neighborhood of Denver approached Focus Points Family Resource Center, a nonprofit in that same neighborhood, and posed this simple question. We all know how to cook. How can we use those skills to support ourselves and our families? And that simple question is how our non-traditional, holistic culinary school/restaurant Earners You Learn program was born. And it did make for a slightly confusing job post, but I have to tell you that I did get that job, and today I am their executive chef and program manager. So here's how it works. We invite low-income and refugee women who already have skills as home cooks to enroll and participate in our program. We design our curriculum to supplement the skills they already have. We use their heritage recipes, meaning the recipes that they grew up with in their home countries, like Mexico or Venezuela or Iraq or Ethiopia. We use those recipes to teach them how to start and operate their food business. Every day, a participant is in charge of developing the menu. So you might come in one day and have a Jaj Bilfarine dish from Syria, a roasted chicken dish, for example. And then another day, you might come in and have a variety of tamales from Cuernavaca, Mexico. Other participants, they get the opportunity as well to learn how to be a dishwasher or a prep cook, a line cook. And participants are able to earn a stipend for all of this because you beautiful people out there, the community, you come to the restaurant and you buy the food that they make while they're training. Remember I said they already know how to cook. By using these recipes, these heritage recipes that they grew up with, we're closing that gap between the trivial knowledge that you'll only use in school and practical real-world skills. How many of you can relate to that gap? Right? When I graduated from culinary school, I had to learn about the 5 mother sauces. I went to French culinary school, if you remember. Sauce Espagnole, sauce tomate, velouté, bechamel, and hollandaise. Now, when I graduated from culinary school, my first job was actually in a New Zealand and Australian restaurant in New York at that time. I should also tell you, growing up, I ate a lot of curry with turmeric as the main ingredient. Now, all of this is to say, when the chef at that restaurant asked me to go get turmeric from the walk-in refrigerator, 2 things stuck out at me. 1, the turmeric was in a refrigerator. I had grown up with turmeric all my life. I didn't know it was in a refrigerator. I'd seen it powdered. The second thing that stuck out to me was that turmeric looks like an orange mealworm. Have any of you seen it? I was shocked. There was so much to learn still. I wasn't set. I didn't know it all. Knowing those 5 mother sauces from France only gets you so far in the world. Except, hollandaise got me out of a few jams working brunch, I must admit. But that's why if you ask any great chef where they learn the most, chances are they'll say a restaurant and not a school. But that's true for most professions, right? So why isn't education then the primary responsibility of both the employee and the employer? Perhaps we could solve some of our corporate retention problems if we spent less time trying to find the right candidate, and we spent more time focusing our energies on nurturing the talent that we already have. Yeah. But that means we would have to see people as whole people, right? Whole people with full lives, exactly. We would also have to trust the fact, just like in high school, just like in elementary school, we would have to trust the fact that adult learners, where adult learners are right now, it's not a perfect indicator of who they can become. We would also have to be accountable to the fact that what an employee or a student needs to succeed might be radically different from what we expect. For example, one participant fled her country as a refugee while she was pregnant, crossing rivers by foot before even landing in Denver. Another participant, a grandmother, never made it past the 3rd grade because she had to leave school so she could work on her family's farm so that they could survive. Both of these women want to be entrepreneurs. They both can be entrepreneurs. But what they need to succeed will be different from each other. They might need resources you wouldn't expect to get from a culinary school or a restaurant, like housing assistance, medical assistance, food access. Another participant, she can cook her Durango recipes from memory consistently. That's Durango, Mexico. And I mean, that's a skill all on its own. But to operate a food establishment, she would need to standardize those measurements, structure a recipe, and then communicate it with her staff. And so to do that, we identified that she would just need to learn a little bit more English than she already knew. So we included English language acquisition classes in her curriculum. By understanding what each student needs, by realizing that we need to be flexible in how we reach them, that realization, that's life-changing. Every nonprofit, every for-profit even, should see themselves as this: not a savior and not a master, but as a pathfinder, right? As one who lights a path for others by connecting them with resources outside of their network so that they can fulfill their true potential. Today, Kamal has helped over 30 immigrant and refugee women. Many of them have started their own food businesses using their heritage recipes and lessons from the program. One of those women I mentioned before, one of those 6 original women, Sylvia Hernandez, right? Sylvia Hernandez recently graduated and launched La Catrina Grill, using her recipes from Mexico City, Oaxaca, Puerto Vallarta. She got around Mexico. She also operates 2 cafes for Lost City, another nonprofit in Boulder and Denver. Another graduate, Erica Rojas, she started her business, Prieto's Catering, food truck and catering business, highlighting her recipes from her native Guadalajara. I spoke to Erica this summer. I wanted to know if Prieto's Catering was available for a catering event. As it turns out, we're a little too busy to do catering ourselves. But that's a good thing. We frequently hire it out and refer it to our graduates. That's what the program's supposed to do. And so I asked her if she was available for this event. She told me, "Chef, I'm on vacation." I said, immediately in my mind, work-life balance, work-life balance, work-life balance. Erica, you need to get off the phone, go back to vacation. We can do this when you come back, it's okay. Well, she did hang up the phone, but before she did, she revealed to me that this was the first time that she had been on vacation with her family in 10 years. In 10 years, she had not been able to go on vacation with her family. Let that sit with you for a little. 10 years. For me, that means her restaurant is a success. The future of education, the future of employment even, it starts by acknowledging that people are whole people with full lives. When we start not seeing people as a number on a spreadsheet or as a tick on your checklist, when we start seeing them as real people, we start seeing them as truer versions of themselves. A version that is affected by the world, sure, but also a version that can and does affect the world. We ourselves, we can make the world a better place for ourselves just by rethinking education's value in our lives. Thank you.
Arden.
Meet my old friend.
Yes, I'm always so excited to hear about what's going on at Kamal, and I'm sure there are people in this audience that want some tips on how to cook.
We got the tips.
All right. So why don't you just spend just a minute with us on talking about things that are being offered to the public, the work that you do and the participants are doing. What's some of the offerings?
Well, we do have lunch that we serve Tuesday to Friday, 11 to 2, don't forget. But beyond that, part of the program is also communicating their heritages to you all, right? It's kind of a symbiotic learning experience for the participants and the community. And so we do offer cooking classes as well, and they're really customizable. We did them in person, we've done them virtually, but it really is a conversation between the guest and Kamal. And we customize that, we tailor that experience to your needs. So we've had corporate accounts come in for events. We've had personal events as well. And so you can have anything from a demo to an interactive session. We've had cooking classes on how to make tortillas, to how to make salsa mocaquete, which is salsa with the mortar and pestle. We recently had a Venezuelan one for a yo-yo, which is, this is going to be delicious, trust me. It's a fried plantain that's wrapped around cheese and then battered and fried. It's delicious. We've had cooking classes on pipián sauce, on gorditas. It really runs the gamut, and it really does, the topics are really colored by the cohorts that we have. So depending on where they're from, that's what we offer. It really is designed and implemented by the participants. It's a great opportunity then for them to gain confidence in their recipes as well, right? So part of this process, as you know, is if anyone that started a business is having confidence in yourself. And so being able to explain those recipes and their heritage and feel proud to present that to everyone is also part of the program. So the cooking classes are available as scheduled. It's not on a schedule.
That sounds amazing. Now, you all know what to ask for your holiday gifts now?
Right?
Or your New Year's resolution, whatever that might be.
Eat more Kamal.
And I have an Eat More Kamal. I have 3 new hashtags. Hashtag Eat More Kamal. Hashtag Cook Like Arden. Hashtag Be Like the Ladies of Kamal.
Yes.
Yes. Thank you so much,
Yes.
Arden.
Thank you so much.
Yes,
All right.
yes.
Bye.
Thank you.
All right.
Amazing. Well, just to let you know, throughout our day today, we'll be asking some questions, just like I just did with Arden of some of our speakers. And for most, we'll just let their talk speak for itself. And before we go on to our next speaker, we have a video for you, and you'll see these throughout the program as well. They're not paid ads, nor are they produced by us. They're simply videos that we find creative, beautiful, and funny, and they're part of the overall experience. We hope you enjoy them. I just love that. It's hilarious. Before we dive into our first performance of the day, a reminder that you'll be on camera today. You've probably already figured that one out. So we're going to ask that you please silence and put away your phones and keep your masks on while you're inside the theater. Today you'll hear about so many different ideas from so many different perspectives. That's what I love about TEDxMileHigh. That's part of the fun. Your favorite talk might be someone else's least favorite talk, and that's completely normal, and that's completely okay. Having been to so many of these events, my advice is to embrace your own experiences. That's the whole idea. Don't worry about what the people around you are doing. You get to have your own opinion all day long. Lean into your curiosity and enjoy the ride. Now you're probably noticing behind me like just beauty getting all set up. I kind of like this. Can you just imagine walking through life and just saying, there's beauty getting all set up behind me? That's what's happening right now. I'm going to go ahead and introduce, though, what you are getting ready to experience and who you're getting ready to experience. Next, Inaiah and Chela Lujan are sixth-generation Colorado natives of Latinx and Jicarilla Apache ancestry. They were born to a family of teachers, healers, and music lovers. Chela is a devoted disciple of, check this out, Hank Williams and Patsy Cline. All right, so you've got some fans here. And Inaiah draws inspiration from 50s and 60s folk, rock, pop, R&B, soul, and hip-hop. They're part of the Haunted Wind Chimes, and it's a great pleasure to have them here today.
Thank you. Look at me. Yeah, look at me go. Where I stop, I don't really know. I've been chasing a dream. I've been dreaming so long. All these tears, tears that I've cried. All these tears that I've cried. All these fears about you and I've been running away. I've been running so long. Change is a snake that bites, and I wanna be bitten. I wanna be bitten. Change is a snake that bites. I wanna be bitten. I wanna be bitten. I've been waiting for you listen to my heart. I've been waiting for you. I've been waiting so long. So long. So long. So long. Thank you. We got another tune for you.
It's a dancing one.
I don't want to bake no bread. I just want to rest my head. I ain't trying to go to sleep. I just want you next to me. In my bed, in my bed, in my bed, in my bed. I ain't trying to waste your time. I just want to change your mind. In your heart, you know it's true. I just want to be with you, yeah. In my bed, help us out. In my bed, there you go. In my bed, thank you. In my my bed, in my bed, come on. In my bed, in my bed. I don't want to bake no bread. I just want to rest my head. I ain't trying to go to sleep. I just want you next to me. In my bed, in my bed, in my bed, in my bed. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
I don't know how you follow something like that. Oh my gosh, Inaiah and Chela, thank you so much. It was just amazing. I just want to go do, 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 do. That's going to stay in my head. All right, let me talk about something that's really important. It's our partners. I want to thank our partners, and we have a number of people to thank. Thank you to the Boettcher Foundation for its tremendous support, and welcome to the many scholars and alumni that are in the audience today. Let's give them a hand. It's okay. And let's also thank Yellow Dog Printing and Graphics. They are our print and signage partner. Amazing. And a special thanks to Galvanize for creating an ecosystem for tech entrepreneurs and innovators to thrive and grow their businesses in a like-minded community. Be sure when you get a chance to visit them. Let's give Galvanize a hand. Be sure to visit them about all of your co-working needs. We're also honored to partner with the Morris Animal Foundation. They're a global leader, yay, yeah. They're a global leader in supporting studies that find solutions to serious health threats to animals. They've invested, listen to this, $142 million in 2,850 studies that have improved the health and quality of life for dogs, cats, horses, and wildlife around the world. It's amazing. Yeah. And thank you also to FEMA for not just responding to disasters, but for helping all of us better prepare for the future, whether that's putting together your emergency kit or knowing how to prepare for a flood or having a plan for your pets during a natural disaster. Be sure to visit their exhibit booth too when you go on intermission, not right now. We want you to take a look at their virtual reality system. It helps you to experience a flood that might be happening in the world virtually. You can learn more in the digital program. So did you know that TEDxMileHigh is a nonprofit organization? How many of you knew that it's a nonprofit? Okay, amazing. While we are small, you know our impact is large, and this year was a huge milestone. 120 million views of our talks online. Isn't that amazing? So we invite you to spread the support, spread big ideas with a gift to TEDxMileHigh. Last year we launched our TEDxMileHigh Insiders membership program, which you can review in our event program. Members experience TEDxMileHigh like no other with exclusive access to a wide range of benefits and experiences. So, to donate, text Rethink to 202-858-1233 or visit TEDxMileHigh.com. We really do appreciate your generous support. Okay, so let's see who's in here in the audience today. So raise your hand, because we have visitors, but raise your hand if you live in Colorado. Okay, now keep your hands up. Keep it raised if you've lived here more than a year. All right? Keep it raised if you've lived here more than 5 years. Oh my gosh. What about more than 10 years? What about more than 20 years? What about more than 50 years? Woo, right. Look. How many years has it been? 58. 68. Oh my gosh. What time's dinner? That's amazing. This is amazing. Wow. Congratulations and thank you. You are the historians in this state, so we'll be coming to you on all kinds of levels. Thank you. Well, I've been here a long time too. I've been here 25 years, and wow, what differences we've seen in our community. It's an interesting time in history for us to all come together to work in a collective. It seems like our wildfire problem gets worse and worse, though, right? And when was the last time we didn't have a smoky summer, as you start to think about Colorado? So here to share her vision is a fire ecologist and faculty member of the Forest and Rangeland Stewardship Department at Colorado State University and the assistant director of the Colorado Forest Restoration Institute. Please welcome Camille Stevens-Ruman. Thank you.
Wildfires. The very word makes us anxious. We imagine homes burning down, smoke-filled skies, and scared and hurt animals. In 2020 alone, wildfires burned over 10 million acres, destroying communities and burning our iconic places, like Rocky Mountain National Park and old-growth giant sequoias. It's why we think all fires are bad. But as we sift through the post-fire rubble, a different truth becomes clear. More fire is the answer to our fire problem. I'm a former wildland firefighter, and it might sound strange that I think we need more fire. I fought wildfires in almost every Western US state, from very small fires started by people and lightning that burn maybe a single tree, to very large fires. Perhaps you've seen structure firefighters in action, blasting homes with hundreds of gallons of water. What we do is really different. We cut down trees, we dig trenches, we try to stop the fire from advancing by cutting off its fuel supply. And I've breathed in more smoke than probably any lungs should, and I have seen the destruction that very large fires can cause. But I've also seen the good that the right kind of fire can do. And that made me question why we put so much effort into putting them out. I still fight fires occasionally, but now I study how ecosystems recover after fires as a fire ecologist at Colorado State University. The data is clear. We are not going into a time of less fire globally. Climate and fire scientists will tell you that more fire is coming. That's why we need to learn how to use and live with fire, not just put it out. In many ecosystems around the world, fire is an essential ingredient, but not any fire will do. Fire is a driving force, a process, one that can bring so much good to an ecosystem, if it burns the right way. For example, good fire can help our water supply. 70% of the drinking water in the US comes from our mountain forests. But in the western US, many of our forests haven't seen fire in 100 to 150 years. Our forests are dense and overgrown, and all these trees are taking up more water than usual. That causes water shortages for plants, animals, and people. But this doesn't happen when we use fire to maintain our forests. Then fire opens everything up. Fewer trees mean more water to go around, and that means more happy trees. Plus, these open forests are less likely to experience that next high severity, large, catastrophic fire that can result in landslides, flooding, and water quality problems. These less severe fires are also necessary for the plants and fungi that need fire. Black morels and other delicious mushrooms only emerge from the soil after a fire. As the smoke clears, you can see them sprouting among the blackened stumps. Even with all the science we do know, we don't know why fire turns on some fungi. But we do know that without fire, many remain dormant, quietly growing underground. Fireweed and other wildflowers splash colors and smells across the forest floor just months after a fire. But then, just like the mushrooms, they peter out when there hasn't been a fire for a while. Certain trees actually need fire too. Species like lodgepole pine await the heat of a fire to open up their resin-sealed cones and drop seeds on the fresh, newly burned soil. As you walk through an area burned just last year, you might see these tiny baby trees just starting to emerge. They have a fire tracking app. Fire is both an end and a new beginning. Many animals have learned to live in these burnable landscapes too. Firehawks of Australia actually pick up burning sticks during a fire and deposit them in new areas to rustle up their prey. The black-backed woodpecker is perfectly camouflaged against the blackened trees as it snacks on its insect lunch. Deer and elk often skirt active fires, returning to those newly burned landscapes to profit from those resprouting plants. So how do we reconcile a world where fire is essential for our natural areas, but can destroy us if we're not careful? In the past 100 years, we are the first generations of North America, unlike the original land stewards of our lands, to suppress rather than live with fire. After the 1910 big burn that ripped through Idaho, Montana, and Washington, killing 87 people and burning over 3 million acres, fire became public enemy number one. This is not an uncommon visual. We learned to suppress fire at all cost. These fire suppression policies shaped our landscapes for the past century, and this mindset of fire suppression is still with us today. These fire suppression policies did work for a while, in part because of a cooler climate during the middle of the 20th century, but in part, these fires, or the lack of them, was having a compounding effect. Without fires, our landscapes were becoming more dense, our forests were growing every year, and those fuels were accumulating with every passing year. Today, we suppress 98% of all fires that start. That means it's only the 2% that are burning the majority of our landscapes on the hottest, driest, and windiest days. It's that 2% that makes headlines and defines our current relationship with fire. But we can become fire stewards instead of fire suppressors. When we change our perception as fire being bad to fire as a survival tool, we open up the possibility that plants, animals, and people can all benefit from fire. For insight, Indigenous communities have used fire for hundreds of uses over 10,000 years. Some communities used fire to promote game habitat for hunting. Others used it to promote the growth of edible plants or building materials, and some used them for ceremonial purposes. They live safely and amicably with fire. A study from Washington State found that if we had allowed the lightning-started fires of the last 100 years to burn, the more recent and catastrophic fires they've had would not have been so hot and large, meaning there would be more living trees there today. It's time for us to become fire stewards instead of just fire suppressors. We can learn to use these fires again. We're already putting out 98% of them. If instead we allowed those fires that are burning under moderate wind, moisture, and weather conditions to burn, we might get the benefit of fire without all the destruction. In New Mexico, Gila wilderness managers have been allowing lightning-started fires to burn their natural course. By reducing their fuels and burning the understory under the watchful eye of fire managers, over the past 4 decades, they've already changed the size and severity of many of the more recent fires. As a firefighter, using fire is a really cool experience. We can set boundaries, and we can be more strategic and less reactive. And in this way, we help fires burn in the understory, and we keep trees alive. This means more big, beautiful, and happy trees out there on the landscape. This is hard work, and I'm not talking about a small effort. But with science and strategy, we can keep people, places, and animals safe while still allowing fires to burn. To become fire stewards, fire managers must be allowed to use fire rather than just suppress them. They must be allowed to use them when the conditions are right and practice more prescribed fire to treat our landscapes. Today, our fire suppression or our use of fire is limited by our fire suppression mindset, by our policy and community resistance to allow fires to burn, and by our lack of resources to adequately shepherd these fires. Smoky days are ahead, but we can space them out and make them not as intense as when they burn hot and large near our homes. We need a workforce of fire stewards, not just fire suppressors. Wildfire fighters are often stationed in areas of active fire. Those areas, we need firefighters. But that means that other parts of the US that may be in prime condition for a prescribed fire now lack the resources and people to make it happen. We must accept that fire is an essential ingredient in the landscapes that we love. And we can ask our communities and land managers what we can do and that we support fire in our ecosystems. It's time that we encourage and promote our fire and forest managers in their need to think about fire as a tool rather than a problem to be attacked. Fire is an end and a beginning. It is either a problem or a solution. A no wildfire alternative is not in our future, but a good wildfire alternative is. What will we choose? Will we continue to let these large, hot, out-of-control fires burn our communities as we struggle to fight them? Or will we learn from the original land stewards of our lands and from the plants and animals that are benefiting and adapting? Are we ready to invite fire back into our lives and ecosystems? Thank you.
Camille, thank you so much. So fascinating. And that picture of you as a hotshot firefighter? Just saying. Let's spend a minute on you telling us a little bit more about wildfires here in Colorado.
Yeah, we've obviously seen some really large and crazy fires, especially last year. And I think one of the interesting things is we obviously have really different ecosystems as you go up the mountain, right? It's very different from here near the Front Range all the way up to those mountain passes. And in some of those places, hot fires that burn over the tops of trees are natural. They're not in these lower elevation forests, but I think one of the things that is not normal for any of our forests is the amount and the size of fires that we saw in 2020. And so that's where, some good fire can be burning trees, because you get all those baby trees, but certainly not those size and the severity we saw in a lot of the fires from last year.
Yeah, thank you so much. We just find your talk really interesting, things that we all should be thinking about. And so we thank you for all of the work that you're doing. And for the audience, next up, a video. I'll escort you out. Before we head into our final speaker of session 1, can you believe it? We're at our final speaker for session 1. I want to share something about intermission. We're really kind around here. We give you an intermission. You'll have an hour, a whole hour, to check out more than a dozen exhibits where you get to build your own incense blend with our bazaar, or share your musical ideas with Youth on Record, or try virtual reality with FEMA, just to name a few. So be sure to check them out. Our final speaker of session 1 is the Denver Public Library's first equity, diversity, and inclusion manager. She amplifies voices of marginalized communities that are left on the fringes of academic research and public policy. Here to guide us on how to expand our view and be more bold in our dreaming is Ozi Alozium.
In 2019, I found myself in Amsterdam with a group of scholars from the US, Jamaica, and the Netherlands. I had just finished my master's program, where I was deep in critical race theory before it became taboo and started trending on Twitter. I was imagining a new social work curriculum, rooted in racial justice and radical healing. And I'll be honest, Going into that trip, I felt scared and unsure about the state of the world. This was 2019. Bolsonaro had just become president of Brazil. The Amazon was burning. A white supremacist had live-streamed his attack on a mosque in New Zealand. Brexit was happening, and we were seeing a surge in asylum seekers at the US southern border, a surge in xenophobia, and a surge in ignorance and apathy. Everything felt so heavy, and I was beginning to think that this was as bad as it could get, which, LOL, hello 2020, didn't see that coming. But just when I thought I'd feel this way forever, there was a shift. During that trip, my mentor, Dr. Frank Tuitt, one of the co-leaders for the group, brought up Audre Lorde's famous quote, "The master's tools cannot dismantle the master's house. For they may allow us temporarily to beat him at his own game, they will never enable us to bring about genuine change." That's interesting. The master's tools cannot dismantle the master's house. Then does that mean we need new tools? And are we not also tools too? If so, then what change must occur within us? I remember returning back to the United States feeling reinvigorated. I had a more expansive sense of what was possible in our fight for social justice. I didn't have a name for it at the time, but I now understand what moved me. What fundamentally shifted my perspective was the way that that trip activated my radical imagination. Radical imagination is a tool to reimagine ourselves in society time and time again. It's the audacity to live in the world as it is while dreaming something different and believing that dream is possible even when you cannot see it. It's about being humble enough to ask questions of ourselves and of each other. It's about being courageous enough to learn and unlearn. It's so different than what we were taught in school, right? Where we were taught how to analyze and analyze and analyze, which essentially means taking things apart. But when did we learn how to put things back together? How to construct something new that's never existed before with no real roadmap or directions? Radical imagination is the instinct that was taught out of us, but is a skill we most desperately need for a liberated future. It can be used in any area of your life. For me, that's social justice work, especially my work around racial equity and healing. Coincidentally, in 2020, my dear friend Bobby Lefebvre reached out to me with an intriguing idea. In addition to being Colorado's Poet Laureate, and the first one of color at that, Bobby is a cultural worker, a mezcal drinker, and an overall dope human being. Well, Bobby received a grant from the National Association of Latino Arts and Culture to create a project to foster radical imagination in racially just systems. He just performed at an event I'd held earlier that year where he'd been moved by my presence and ability to facilitate. And because I too am a dope human being, as well as charming, he brought me in to co-create these conversations. Together, we created Proyecto Sobremesa, Radical Imagination, Accountability, and the Future, or the Radical Imagination Game. It's a way to inspire radical imagination and is an act of radical imagination itself. So, picture this. Bobby and I take a list of local BIPOC cultural workers and artists and select 8 random participants. We send out a thoughtful invitation to folks, letting them know what to expect. That they'll be wined and dined at the beautiful Museo de las Americas. We invite participants to dress in a way that makes them feel powerful and authentic. On the day of the event, Bobby and I set up the space with flowers, candles, and good music. As the guests arrive, they're served themed drinks designed by our mixologist. If you're starting to feel FOMO about not being there yourself, totally understandable. After all of the guests arrive, we transition to an intentionally set table. Bobby introduces the intentions for the night and the chef for our multiple course meal. We invite a guest to share a song, a poem, or a prayer to get us started in a good way. There's usually a mezcal toast, and then Bobby and I bring out 2 bowls. One bowl contains strips of paper for pillars for our liberated future. They include words like abundance, imagination, joy, and justice. We arrived at these pillars over conversations at Bobby's, scribbling on paper on the floor while sipping mezcal. Perhaps you're noticing a theme here. And we tell the guests that these are the values that shape our radically imagined and racially just world, but that they must be paired with accountability. The work we do to prevent, intervene, respond to, and heal from the harm caused by systems of oppression. The second bowl contains strips of paper with sentence stems designed to increase self-awareness. They include phrases like, what is your commitment to, and how do you practice, and what is your dream for? Bobby draws from his bowl of pillars, I draw from mine of sentence stems, and together we pose a question to the group. For example, what messages have you been taught about spirituality? Many times, participants would share how growing up in a particular religious tradition often warps your sense of spirituality, but how spirituality is really that which feeds and fills your spirit. Each time a participant realized that reframe, they physically shifted. It was so powerful to witness. We pull again. I draw. Who do you talk to about? Bobby draws. Abundance. Who do you talk to about abundance? The room goes silent. Because who do you talk to about abundance? We don't talk about it nearly enough, especially Black abundance. Shout out Kiese Lehman. But when we do, thank you. But when we do talk about it, it feels so juicy. Whenever we play the game, my favorite prompts are about abundance and joy. My favorite moments are the ones when participants are so moved by the conversation, their eyes shine. The moments when a participant's response makes us sigh in resonance or roar with laughter. The rare moments of silence when all we can do is look around the room at each other in awe and appreciation. One of our participants recently shared that these conversations inspired him to completely shift his career. He went from being the senior vice president at a bank to being his company's first ever director of diversity, equity, and inclusion. He said that these conversations helped him really think about who his authentic self was and what he truly wanted to create in the world. His partner said that he talked about the game incessantly for weeks, that there was a new energy to him that made him excited about his work in a way that she'd never seen, that he'd become more sure of himself, a better friend and partner, that spending a few hours activating his radical imagination quite literally changed his life. Changed mine. It changes mine daily. It helped me rediscover that feeling I'd felt in Amsterdam. It's a feeling I want to spread and continue spreading as long as I can. It takes a lot of creativity and strength to imagine a world that doesn't exist. It's even harder to do so when living in a world filled with so much suffering and oppression. And to do so with others in the same room, that takes vulnerability. The radical imagination game creates space for collective courage and curiosity. It inspires me to choose creativity and wonder over fear and despair. It makes me courageous enough to ask, what if, and why not, and with who? It's become my daily journal practice. And in some ways, it made me more prepared for the global crisis that emerged in 2020. Crisis blows open the door of what is possible. It is our job to hold open that door of possibility as far and as wide as possible. Because there are a multitude of innovative solutions to the many issues we face. No one of us will have all of the answers, nor should we expect ourselves to. Instead, Let's try to be as creative as we can be together. Let's try to reimagine our futures again and again and again. Thank you.